Throw all of your normal law-abiding concepts out of the window. Here's a chance to raise merry hell.
Don't you want a world of unconditional love and brotherhood? We have the secrets to self-improvement. You can join us and be special. Join our elite mission to save the world. We can teach you special powers. Personal power. Psychic power.
I don't know all the facts. I don't think we all know all the facts, but I was deeply concerned that this could have been, another organized, highly organized attack on the country.
Why do some artists who have a certain amount of talent, some not very much, why do they get picked up by the corporations to become these big influencers of young people and other people through the entertainment and the music industry, and others with incredible talent never get off the ground? It's because they are chosen.
Most people still today think that all entertainment is therefore nothing more than their entertainment. It never ever was that case.
What we see here is that this is actually all based up into psychological warfare done by military intelligence, wrapped up with occultism.
Disney World looks like a whole fun bunch of rides, but what we actually have here are a number of rides that are sponsored by military industrial corporations.
Happiest place on earth, my snow white ass.
Walt Disney was hired by J. Edgar Hoover to instill mind pattern programming into the children. It was an FBI plan. It was instigated.
To really appreciate how this could be done, you need to appreciate something called trauma-based mind control. During the last war in the concentration camps of Germany, they started to perfect the manipulation of a natural mechanism in the mind that shuts out trauma. If you could systematically traumatize someone and start with children, particularly before the age of 5 and 6, you could turn their minds into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, none of which was aware of the other's existence.
They start with wanting to make you an obedient slave at first, and so they do a lot of sensory deprivation, they do a lot of sensory overload, and they switch between the two, and they do out-and-out torture. They take a small child and they electroshock. In my case, it was electroshock to the brain. I've had drugs injected into my body so that my nerves were just like on fire, and then they would just touch me. They kept me awake for many hours at night, would not let me sleep. They do use cattle prods on people in torturing them, and they do use electrical stimulation to the genitals and also on the teeth. I was made to eat my own feces as a little child. I was made to drink my own urine. I was not allowed to go to the bathroom. I was placed in a sensory deprivation tank. I had my shoulders, my knees, my toes, and my fingers, my elbows dislocated and then put back into place. I have had my eyelids taped open. I saw games of Russian roulette played where it was chosen beforehand that a child would die, and the child would put the gun up to his head and pull the trigger, and this child would end up dying. But it was meant to scare all of us, to keep us in terror.
Disney is used as a torture device to compartmentalize and bring about this dissociative identity disorder.
We've got these list of Mouseketeers. We've got Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake.
These were all poor little children that were brainwashed together in a Disney program.
What they will do is use these people in high-profile rituals.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. But there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you
believe that they're really pulling energy and power into their phallus and energizing themselves to be God-men. They believe it.
Actually, right now we should talk a little about Tom Cruise and Scientology.
Scientology, according to L. Ron Hubbard Jr., is a black ritual done over a long period of time. Instead of getting all your trauma at once, you get it in little increments.
This footage is worth money.
Why? What footage?
This thing you're looking into?
It's a camera.
Exactly.
Britney Spears created quite a commotion here at this tattoo parlor in Sherman Oaks tonight when she showed up, well, let's just say with a whole new look that may not be so popular with her fans.
They aren't just pop stars trying to cry out for attention. These are people that have been put through abuse throughout their lives and raised in this environment that we can't even imagine.
There is breaking news now on Fox News Channel. The Los Angeles Times and the Associated Press are now reporting Michael Jackson has died in Los Angeles this afternoon.
And of course, we know that the Jacksons were also ritually abused.
Really, it's a tragedy at the end of the day. That is the type of creature that his father produced.
You just said that you would practice the dance steps and your father would be holding a belt in his hand. Is that what you just said?
Yes. And he would tear you up if you missed.
I know what evil looks like, folks, and I'm telling you, that's an evil man. And the whole thing is an evil spectacle.
So I finally got my own TV show coming out next fall on CBS. It's a half-hour weekly show that I will host entitled Let's Hunt and Kill Billy Ray Cyrus. It's a fairly self-explanatory plot. Each week we let the hounds of hell loose and we chase that jarhead, no-talent, cracker asshole all over the globe. Until I finally catch that fruity little ponytail of his in the back, pull him to his knees, put a shotgun in his mouth like a big black cock of death.
That's how we sell sex to little girls. That's how we sell sex to little girls.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I come to you today representing families.
The White House claims he's too busy to even acknowledge Sheen's letter, never mind meet with Sheen. But obviously he's not too busy to talk about some mindless antics of this hip-hop star jumping on stage at an MTV Music Awards show.
He's a jackass.
In fact, Obama routinely makes mindless comments about everything under the sun. And yet he can't even acknowledge questions that are shared by the 9/11 victims' family members that are put out in this letter by Charlie Sheen.
And I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this bloody morality. There was moral outrage in America. It's disgusting, Janet Jackson, immoral. I wonder which of these pictures is more sodding immoral.
Welcome to the X Factor. Your final starts right here.
They've been programmed. I'm sad because I know that it's hard for people like that to take a serious interest in world affairs. I see how easy it is for the masses to be manipulated.
It's a psychic weapon to blind people from all the majesty and beauty that is creation, and to blind people from their families and their children and just the amazing life force that's all around us.
The scale and fine detail in which these opinion formers right across society, from entertainment, media through to politics, etc., are actually brought through from childhood to do those things is absolutely incredible. And when the lid really comes off this, and it's coming off, then people are going to look at the world they've been living in and see just, even if people now think, yes, it's a controlled world, whoa, wait till you see the level of control.
We're standing up to the drama that they do bring. Just check the left hand, see the G ring, and
Mock rituals, what are they unleashing? Masonic rituals, live on TV. It's all been exposed, like the toxic flow. Just like MK Ultra, it's all my control. You tripping when you ain't sipping. Have a refill, you feeling like you in prison, huh? That's 'cause that's real.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. You can see it when you turn on your television. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
The buildings behind me were the headquarters for the World War II Office of Strategic Services. It was here that the first halting steps toward mind control began.
The shaper and molder of OSS was General Wild Bill Donovan. He said of his group's work, "We may have made mistakes, but we were not afraid to try things that were never done before."
The brain's complexity dwarfs that of any existing computer. There are approximately 100 billion nerve cells, or neurons, in the human brain, almost as numerous as the stars in the Milky Way. Each of these cells has a negative electrical charge inside the cell and a positive charge along the outside of the cell membrane, in essence creating a tiny electric battery. Think of it as the brain's software, the world's most sophisticated search engine.
Inside our heads, the nerve cells are all engaged in kind of a telephone-like conversation, one speaking to the next, and as the information is going through, each neuron is listening to all of its neighbors, giving rise to more and more complicated signal processing inside our brains.
But the first critical step to cracking the code of how the brain processes information is being able to listen in on these millions of telephone-like conversations all taking place at once. Believe it or not, as information passes through the brain, the electrical impulses between neurons can be heard. This is the actual sound of a brain neuron firing. So in a way, we can literally hear thoughts. But how do we translate those sounds so we know what the person is thinking? At Brown University, they are working with tiny computer chips that can be implanted into the brain to transmit neuron impulses to a computer for mind-reading interpretation. It's like connecting your iPod to a computer and downloading music. Scientists can now connect your brain to a computer. Their goal is to help the mentally impaired.
So this is the next generation sensor system.
Dr. John Donahue is director of the Institute for Brain Science at Brown University. He's developed a remarkable piece of technology that can hardwire our brain to a computer.
It consists of the same electrode array, the baby aspirin-sized 100 electrode array that goes into just the surface of the brain.
This tiny chip monitors 100 different neurons as they fire. The firing pattern is displayed on this grid.
These spikes, these electrical impulses that come up. We know that's a language of the brain, a rapid communication system for the brain.
What if there was a machine that could crack this code and interpret what these spikes mean? There is. It's called BrainGate, and it was developed by Dr. Donahue. The way it works is that the tiny chip he's holding in his hand can be implanted in a person's brain. The chip picks up electrical impulses, which specially designed software then interprets as the actions a person wants to perform. Essentially, the chip can read a person's thoughts, much like a computer can recognize a voice and interpret what it is saying. In one of the rare times ever tested on TV, Dr. Donahue has set up an experiment to demonstrate the remarkable ability of BrainGate. He places the chip on his scalp and takes a seat in front of a computer that's been loaded with the BrainGate software. An arm, simulating Dr. Donahue's arm, appears on the screen. Also appearing is a ball. The challenge? Using only his thoughts, Dr. Donahue will attempt to control the arm to reach for the ball and move it. These are real-time images of the electrical impulses firing inside Dr. Donahue's brain as the chip listens in on his thoughts. His mind is asking the arm to move. After a few moments, the arm obeys. It slowly glides across the screen, reaches for the ball, and gently moves it. Amazingly, Dr. Donahue has moved the arm simply by willing it.
Who are you really shopping for this holiday season? It's okay, you can admit it, if you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Well, it's okay, you can admit it if you have bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. You've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it, Todd. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 10 items for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it, if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought maybe an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Is it okay? You can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 3 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you brought an item or 2 or 10 for you.
It's okay, you can admit it.
If you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10.
It was in this atmosphere that the search for mind control began. This bizarre man would be an active participant in that search over the next 2 decades. His name is George White, an OSS captain who had formerly been with the Bureau of Narcotics. In his diary, seen here publicly for the first time, White left a legacy of the darker side of American intelligence work. He received his early OSS training at the British-run school at Oshawa, Canada, the same school where Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, was trained. White referred to the school in his diaries as the Oshawa School of Mayhem and Murder. Mike Burke, former OSS colleague of White's and now president of Madison Square Garden Center.
Very compelling fellow, mysterious fellow, almost mystical fellow. He was fascinating because you knew something about him, but not enough about him to really get a fix on him. He also knew a great deal about the swifter elements of society, the gamier side of life, and he was very impressive in his technical knowledge of the underworld, so to speak.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest and my uterus in 1975. Each time I became dizzy, nauseous, and threw up. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. The first significant memory took place at Kansas City University in 1966. Don Ebner took me there by plane when my mom was out of town. I was in what looked like a laboratory, and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Dr. Green had electrodes on my body, including my head. He used what looked like an overhead projector and repeatedly said he was burning different images into my brain while a red light flashed aimed at my forehead. In between each sequence, he used electric shock on my body and told me to go deeper and deeper, while repeating each image would go deeper into my brain, and I would do whatever he told me to do. I felt drugged because he had given me a shot before he started the procedure. When it was over, he gave me another shot. The next thing I remember, I was with my grandparents again in Tucson, Arizona. I was 4 years old. You can see from this experiment that Dr. Green used trauma, drugs, post-hypnotic suggestion, and more trauma in an effort to gain total control of my mind. He used me in radiation experiments both for the purposes of determining the effects of radiation on various parts of my body and to terrorize me as an additional trauma in the mind control experiments. The rest of the experiments took place in Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert. I was taught how to pick locks, be secretive, use my photographic memory, and a technique to withhold information by repeating numbers to myself. Dr. Green moved on to wanting me to kill dolls that looked like real children. I stabbed a doll with a spear once after being severely traumatized, but the next time I refused. He used many pain induction techniques, but as I got older, I resisted more and more. He often tied me down in a cage, which was near his office. Between 1972 and 1976, he and his assistants were sometimes careless and left the cage unlocked. Whenever physically possible, I snuck into his office and found files with reports and memos addressed to CIA and military personnel. Included in these files were project, subproject, subject, and experiment names with some code numbers for radiation and mind control experiments, which I have submitted in your written documentation. I was caught twice, and Dr. Green ruthlessly used electric shock, drugs, spun me on a table, put shots in my stomach, in my back, dislocated my joints, and hypnotic techniques to make me feel crazy and suicidal. Because of my rebellion and growing lack of cooperation, they gave up on me as a spy assassin. Consequently, the last 2 years, 1974 to 1976, Dr. Green used various mind control techniques to reverse the spy assassin messages to self-destruct and death messages. His purpose? He wanted me dead, and I struggled to stay alive all of my adult life. I believe it is by the grace of God that I am still alive. These horrible experiments have profoundly affected my life. I developed multiple personality disorder because Dr. Green's goal was to split my mind into as many parts as possible so he could control me totally. He failed, but I've had to endure years of constant physical, mental, and emotional pain, even to this day. I've been in therapy consistently for 12 years, and it wasn't until I found my current therapist 2.5 years ago who had knowledge of the mind control experiments that I've finally been able to make real progress and begin to heal. In closing, I ask that you keep in mind that the memories I've described are but a glimpse of the countless others that took place over the 10 years between 1966 and 1976. That they weren't just radiation, but mind control and drug experiments as well. I have included more detailed information of what I remember in your written documentation. Please help us by recommending an investigation and making the information available so that therapists and other mental health professionals can help more people like myself. I know I can get better. I am getting better. And I know others can too, with the proper help. Please help us in an effort to prevent these heinous acts from continuing in the future. Thank you very much.
Between the years of 1957 and 1984, I became a pawn in a government scheme whose ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all through the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing, verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. I was exploited unwittingly for nearly 3 decades of my life, and the only explanations given to me were that, quote, the end justifies the means, and, quote, I was serving my country in their bold effort to fight communism. I can only summarize my circumstances by saying they took an already abused 7-year-old child and compounded my suffering beyond belief. The saddest part is, I know for a fact that I was not alone. There were countless other children in my same situation, and there was no one to help us. Until now. I've already submitted as much information as possible, including conversations overheard of the people, agencies responsible. I'm able to report all this to you in such detail because of my photographic memory and the arrogance of the doctors, the arrogance of the people involved. They were certain they would always control my mind. Although the process of recalling these atrocities is not an easy one, nor is it without some danger to myself and my family, I feel the risk is worth taking. Dr. L. Wilson Green, who claimed to have received $50 million from the Edgewood Chemical and Radiology Laboratory as part of the TSD, or Technical Science Division of the CIA, once described to Dr. Charles Brown that, quote, children were used as subjects because they were more fun to work with and cheaper, too. They needed lower profile subjects than soldiers or government people, so only young, willing females would do. Besides, he said, I like scaring them. They in the agency think I'm a god, creating subjects and experiments for whatever deviant purposes Sid and James can think up. Sid being Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, James, Dr. James Hamilton. In 1958, I was to be tested, they told me, by some important doctors from the society, or the Human Ecology Society, and I was instructed to cooperate. I was told not to look at anyone's faces and not to ignore any names, as this was a very secret project. But I was told to be brave, and all these things would help me forget. Naturally, as most children do, I did the opposite and remembered as much as I could. Dr. John Gittinger tested me, Dr. Cameron gave me the shocks, and Dr. Green the x-rays. Then I was told by Sid Gottlieb that, quote, I was right for the big A, or meaning artichoke. By the time I left to go home, just like every time from then on, I would remember only whatever explanations Dr. Robert G. Heath of Tulane Medical University gave me for the odd bruises, needle marks, burns on my head, fingers, and even the genital soreness. I had no reason to believe otherwise. They had already begun to control my mind. The next year, I was sent to a lodge in Maryland called Deep Creek Cabins to learn how to sexually please men. I was taught how to coerce them into talking about themselves, and it was Richard Helms, who was deputy director of the CIA, Dr. Gottlieb, Captain George White, Morris Allen, who all planned on filming as many high government agency officials and heads of academic institutions and foundations as possible, so that later when the funding for mind control and radiation started to dwindle, projects would continue. I was used to entrap many unwitting men, including themselves, all with the use of a hidden camera. I was only 9 years old when this sexual humiliation began. I overheard conversations about a part of the agency called ORD, which I found out was Office of Research and Development. It was run by Dr. Green, Dr. Stephen Aldrich, Martin Orne, and Morris Allen. Once a crude remark was made by Dr. Gottlieb about a certain possible leak over New Orleans East involving a large group of retarded children who are being given massive doses of radiation. He asked, why was Wilson so worried about a few retarded kids? After all, they would be the least likely to spill the beans. Another time, I heard Dr. Martin Orne, who was the director then of the scientific office and later the head of the Institute for Experimental Research, state that, quote, in order to keep more funding coming from different sources for radiation and mind control projects, he suggested stepping up the amounts of stressors used and also the blackmail portion of the experiments. He said it needed to be done faster than to get rid of the subjects, or they were asking for us to come back later and haunt them with our remembrances. There's much more I could tell you about government-sponsored research, including project names, sub-project numbers, people involved, facilities used, tests, and other forms of pain induction. But I think I've given more than enough information to recommend further investigation of all the mind control projects, especially as they involve so much use of the radiation. I would love nothing more than to say that I dreamed all this up and need just to forget it. But that would be a tragic mistake. It would also be a lie. All these atrocities did occur to me and to countless other children, and all under the guise of defending our country. It is because of the cumulative effects of exposure to radiation, chemicals, drugs, pain, and subsequent mental and physical distress that I've been robbed of the ability to work and even to bear any children of my own. It is blatantly obvious that none of this was needed, nor should it ever have been allowed to take place at all. And the only means we have to seek out the awful truth and bring it to light is by opening whatever files remain on all the projects and through another presidential commission on mind control. I believe that every citizen of this nation has the right to know just what is fact and what is fiction. It is our greatest protection against the possibility of this ever happening again. In conclusion, I can offer you no more than what I've given you today, the truth. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, you have the doorway here.
Yeah.
Okay, then to the right you have a hedge, and then
Yeah.
you have an evergreen tree. If you follow that line straight back, courtyard's in there.
Okay.
So
that's where they have the ceremonies in
the outdoor part of it. Part of it was indoors. So we only got to see the outdoor part.
Right.
We only got to, and to listen to the outdoor part. God only knows what went on indoors.
And what did you hear? What was it you know? You managed to get this unique
It was
access to it.
disgusting. It was gross. I mean, they were pretending to murder people.
What was the tone of it, though? Was it jokey? Or was
Vicious.
it quite
No, it wasn't jokey at all. It was sick. It's about the only way I can describe it. It was sick.
What you're hearing is the first recording ever made of the Skull and Bones initiation ceremony. It has never been broadcast before. There's the chants too, difficult to hear first of all, but including the devil equals death and death equals death.
Then members performing a mock killing.
We can find the order behind the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. We can find behind the rise of Hitler. We can find in the maintenance of both of these systems, the transfer of technology to both.
Since you've already proven that Wall Street is behind the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of Hitler, now you're proving that the order is behind Wall Street.
Exactly.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322.
Tim Russert, the moderator of Meet the Press and NBC's Washington bureau chief, collapsed and died early this afternoon while at work at the NBC News Bureau in Washington.
What have Herbert Hoover, Art Linkletter, Jack London, and Richard Nixon all had in common? Well, they've all been members of the exclusive all-male Bohemian Club.
In God.
In God.
In God. Stay out of the way, people.
God.
I think partly because of the magnitude of the disaster, and frankly partly because of the terrific way that the American press has covered it, and the press throughout the world.
And what that means is, when these bloodline families go into positions of power, what we're actually doing is seeing these entities go into those positions of power.
Now these guys who are manipulating my mind and programming me for mind control purposes claimed, and these criminals in control of our country as well, claimed to be gods, demons, and aliens, in order that I feel totally helpless, in order that I felt like they were beyond my realm to affect.
So these bloodlines can be, quote, possessed, their emotional, mental faculties taken over much more easily than the general run of the population does not have that hybrid DNA, thus that vibrational sympathy, compatibility between the two energy fields. So what they're doing in effect is using the secret society network they've set up to manipulate these bodies into power, but in doing so they're putting themselves into power because they're controlling the mental and emotional processes of these vehicles.
Okay, what we're thinking of as aliens are they're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be.
But they're not doing anything.
They are not. They want the major population centers wiped out so that the few that are left will be more easily controllable.
Let's go on with this subject of the Illuminati and its symbols. You will find the symbol of this secret society on the back of a $1 bill.
He told me that you're going to see men running around caves looking for Osama bin Laden. You know, you're going to see men looking for, you know, these guys, and they're going to be, you know.
He told you it was all going to be bull.
It's a phony. The whole thing is a fake. It's a fraud.
Was he laughing, or was he just coldly saying this?
No, it's more laughing. Cynical. Laughing, you know, it's more like, look how stupid everybody is. Look how stupid everybody. We can do whatever we want to do.
Hunt down those people who committed this unbelievable, despicable act on America.
I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war.
I have determined that it is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan. I do not make this decision lightly.
All of us who have served in this office understand that the office itself transcends the individual.
And these families are therefore simply vehicles of these demonic entities. And these gods are these entities which feed off human energy and feed off human blood too. And they're just continuing to do today covertly what they were openly doing in the past. And ultimately, they are possessed by these entities.
There are people who believe that they have a God-given right to rule over others. They believe that their outward appearance is superior to all others. They harbor selfish ambitions to be rich and to have power over what they describe as common people. They lie, cheat, steal, strangle, stab and slash their way to power. They believe that their actual willpower, what the British occultist Aleister Crowley described as the will of Thelema, the royal will, must be obeyed.
Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
The conspiratorial view of history is the correct view of history. Conspiracy to grab property, conspiracy to make illegal profits, and conspiracy to assassinate has been the driving force behind the royal political elite for thousands of years.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you.
He should be well punished for his sins.
What truth?